Hello, class. Today we're going to be finishing up chapter 15. We've just learned about those cardinal virtues. So now we're going to talk about those capital sins, okay? You need to have your notes out, and we're going to write our learning objective. Our learning objective is I will be able to match the virtues that oppose the capital sins, okay? So the capital sins are important for you to know. You need to be your own little expert at this, especially because we got a quiz coming up. This is our last section, so make sure you're doing a good job taking notes. If you need to, you can pause the slide, and let's get going. So capital sins. First off, let's talk vices. We know what virtues are. Virtues are the exact opposite of a vice. So a virtue is a morally good habit. A vice is a habit of doing bad. So for us, our vices are usually our sins, right? So it's the opposite of virtues, and it weakens our soul and leads us to sin. So remember, from original sin, it's easier for us, we think it's easier for us to choose sin and to fall into sin, and it's harder to pick those good and holy choices, those virtues, to practice those. So vices are those things that we are trying to combat every day, our temptations, all those things that are not good for us or for others. Vices are also called capital vices, cardinal sins, capital sins. There's a lot of different names for them. And there are 7 of them: pride, avarice, lust, anger, gluttony, envy, and sloth. So those are the 7. If you need to pause this slide, you can. Okay, so let's talk about those 7 capital sins. Now, first is pride. So what is pride? Pride is to place ourselves before God and our neighbor. This is Adam and Eve's probably number one big reason why they committed the original sin. Remember, it's because they thought they were better than God or above God, right? So that's the sin of pride, and that's a very, very hard one to do. But it's important to know ourselves and to know the proper way to view ourselves and to interact with others. Next is greed. In the last slide, they call it avarice, I think, but we'll call it greed. Greed's a lot easier. It's wanting things we don't need or have a right to. So it's when we kind of start prioritizing things the wrong way. We think, those new AirPods are more important than Jesus, things like that. Those aren't good. Or things you don't need. You don't need 82 cars, right? Like what are you achieving from that? So yeah, greed is definitely an issue for a lot of people, and it's prioritizing material objects over people and relationships, and most importantly, our relationship with God. Then we have lust, which is a disordered desire for sexual pleasure. Sometimes people can have lustful thoughts. Sometimes people view others as objects. It's a disordered desire for sexual pleasure, right? So sex is supposed to be placed within the realms of marriage. It's to perfectly unify the husband and the wife, and to express their love for one another, and to fully give of themselves. Whereas lust, sometimes people are seen more as objects. That's why there's that disordered desire, where I'm trying to get something from you, but I don't care about you, and I don't commit myself to you, right? So lust can be within our thoughts, how we view people, what we think when we see people, or inappropriate images or things like that. But lust is definitely one of those capital sins. Then we have anger, which is a strong dislike towards someone or a large reaction. It's important to remember that there are things to be justly upset about or angry about, but the big thing for anger is, number one, to see why you're angry. Is that because you want justice for someone, or because somebody's not being treated the right way, or is it for a selfish purpose, or you're taking it way out of hand, and it might lead you down making poor actions and poor decisions that are lashing out at others and hurting others. So anger is a big one. Then we have gluttony, having too much of something. Whenever you think of gluttony, everybody always thinks about having 82 cookies, right? It's not just food. You can spend too much time on your phone, which I know is really hard for us. You could spend too much time watching TV, things like that. Too much of something. it's important that we, prioritize our lives and we aren't starting to put, objects or things or pleasures of this world, if we're not overdoing it, right? Next, we have envy, which is sadness over the good of another. So, if my friend and I are competing for this award and my friend wins, that jealousy, that envy, wanting to be that person or wishing you had what that person had, instead, I should be cheering and happy for my friend for winning that award, So it's definitely how we view others, but there is also an element of how we view ourselves and what we prioritize in our life that can lead us towards envy. And then there's sloth, which is laziness. So, if your mom asked you to clean your room and you've been ignoring her for 2 weeks and instead you've just been playing video games the whole time, or not taking out the garbage or not going to work, there's all kinds of ways to be lazy, but those are not good for us. Now, just like the cardinal virtues, these capital sins or these vices are the root of all sins. And you can kind of see that in anything, right? So that's important to know. And it is going to be important that you know these 7, okay? You can pause the video if you need to, but we're going to continue on. Okay, pause. These are not notes. These are not notes. These are not notes. However, I would like you to pause this video and try this exercise out after I explain it. So by yourself, obviously, I want you to look at those 7 capital sins, and I want you to think of a virtue that is the opposite of the sin. Now, it's not just those cardinal virtues. It can just be, any of them. Because a lot of our virtues come or root into those cardinal virtues. But I want you to look at these and think of the opposing virtue. What do you think is the opposite of that? So I want you to pause the video right now and do your best and just see where you're at and try to guess the match from the vice to the virtue. What virtue would combat this vice? You may do so now. Okay, hopefully you did it, but if not, here we go. So let's check our answers. And if you don't have the right one, that's okay, but we are going to go over these, and I need you to have these in your notes. You're going to need that. So how to overcome these vices. Let's look at it. Practice the virtues that oppose the sins. So first one, pride. The opposite virtue is humility, because it sees us as we truly are. It's not putting ourselves down. A lot of people think that to combat pride, you have to say negative things about yourself or put yourself down. No, it's just seeing us for where we are and not gloating about our gifts or making others feel bad if they don't have things that we have. Greed, we have liberality, which is generosity. That's another word. Either of those words work. So instead of being greedy and materialistic, we can be generous with things that we have, the money we have, and to help others, right? So, people in parishes should tithe, which means to give money to the church, to help support the church. That's not being greedy, that's being generous. For lust, you should have chastity, which is the control of those sexual desires and perfecting the love for others and how we should be treating others in all of our relationships, not as objects, but with dignity as God created them, right? Then we have anger. The opposite of anger is patience. Oftentimes, if you're upset about something, when you make those rash decisions or those quick reactions, that's when you get yourself in trouble. But if you're upset about something and you walk away, you take a minute, maybe you pray about it, you ask for help, you have that patience, you can come back to it. And you know what, maybe there is a skirmish or an argument. You can be in a more peaceful place to be able to rationally talk it out with somebody, and you'll probably come to a solution a lot faster. Gluttony, we have temperance, which means to keep things in moderation. So instead of playing video games for 42 hours, maybe you play video games 1 hour a day, right? Different things like that. Keeping things in moderation and control so it doesn't completely wreak havoc in our lives. For envy, it's brotherliness, seeing the best for others, wanting the best for others, especially within marriage or your families. You want them the best for them. You want to help them get to heaven. So we want that for everybody. And then last is sloth, which is laziness. We want diligence, sticking with it, doing it. If you're, if your job is to mow the lawn, you get up and you mow the lawn in a quick and beautiful way, right? And that is it. So the next thing you're going to be doing is you're going to be getting ready for that quiz. So if you have finished your notes, which I hope you have, please make sure you keep everything organized and ready to go. Make sure you have all your notes. I would honestly reread them a couple of times so that way tomorrow or the next class, you can rock that quiz, okay? So stay organized and great work.